for giving me this opportunity. I have been asked to speak on imaging inflammatory bowel disease, what a resident must know. And I must admit that majority of the discussion has already been done on this topic by Dr. Shalin and Crohn's disease. Whereas the former is a mucosal disease, Crohn's disease leads to transmural inflammation. The role of imaging is much more important in Crohn's disease as compared to ulcerative colitis. I'll talk about imaging in context of ulcerative colitis in brief, and then I'll discuss in detail the role of imaging in Crohn's disease. So, for evaluation of ulcerative colitis, ileocolonoscopy is generally preferred for assessment of disease activity. And in patients who have incomplete examination with ileocolonoscopy can undergo cross-sectional imaging as a complementary tool to endoscopy. It has been shown that both MRI and ultrasound detect moderate and severe disease activity with high accuracy. And few scores have been described, like MRI-based score, simple one, and MRI score based on diffusion sequence. Both of them have been shown to have high correlation with endoscopic component of the clinical Mayo score. In patients who have severe ulcerative colitis flare, benefit from imaging investigations to exclude toxic megacolon and perforation. And in this context, abdominal radiograph is usually sufficient. However, in patients who continue to suffer from severe abdominal pain, fever, or significant abdominal tenderness and peritoneal signs, CT is useful. And in one study published in 2013, it was shown that CT can change the strategy for management in 69% of the patients. So we have a case scenario of a 25-year-old male who was a known case of ulcerative colitis in clinical remission and presented with fever, pain abdomen, and bleeding from rectum. These were the serial abdominal radiographs, and one can see that the transverse colon is markedly dilated. It is more than 5 centimeters. There is presence of marked mural thickening, and one can see that the fecal residue is occupying the ascending colon, and there is dilatation of the small bone. And as this patient continued to suffer despite conservative treatment, a CT was performed, which confirms the findings of the abdominal radiograph, shows marked dilatation of the transverse colon. One can see that there are changes of previous subacute or chronic disease in the form of submucosal fat. However, one can see that there is marked active inflammation of the descending colon with significant changes in the mesocolon. Again, marked thickening of the of the descending colon with significant changes in the adjacent pericolonic fat as well as small amount of fluid. And as this patient did not respond to conservative medical management, underwent pancolectomy that showed that there were marked changes in the transverse colon and the descending colon, and there were few pseudopolyps seen as well. So, what is the role of pain radiograph in ulcerative colitis? We have already seen the colonic findings. So, beside colonic findings, the radiograph should also be looked for the skeletal changes, which are in the form of sacroiliitis, ankylosing spondylitis, and avascular necrosis of the femoral head. One should also look for renal calculi. So, what are the colonic findings? Again, recapitulating. So, the first important finding in a patient with acute flare and suspected toxic megacolon is presence of fecal residue. So, in this cartoon, one can see that the fecal residue correlates exactly with the extent of pancreatitis. So, the distal extent of the fecal residue is equal to the proximal extent of active ulcerative colitis. Although this can sometimes overestimate the extent of pancreatitis, as is seen in this case. So, based on the fecal residue, one would label that there is presence of colitis till the transverse colon. However, actually there is colitis involving the rectum and the sigmoid colon, some part of the descending colon. So, fecal residue can overestimate the extent of disease, but never underestimates the extent of disease. So, I will make this concept clearer by using the example which I had shown previously. So, in this case, one can see that there is fecal residue occupying this area. And one can see that there is presence of marked pleural thickening as well as dilatation of the transverse colon. And the same example, one could see that the fecal residue corroborated with the extent of inflammation in this particular example. The other changes that are expected on the plain radiograph abdomen are the widening of postural folds or the absence of postural folds, and the other findings I have already discussed. Barium enema is no longer used to evaluate patients with ulcerative colitis. However, understanding the changes seen on barium enema can help us evaluate the colonic changes in other imaging modalities, CT as well as MRI. So in acute stage, the changes are in the form of mucosal granularity, mucosal stiffening, the collar button ulcers, inflammatory pseudopolyps, which are because of denudation of adjacent mucosa. And these changes are confluent, contiguous, and involve the colon circumferentially. In chronic stage, there is loss of ostrations, there is luminal narrowing, widening of prerectal space, and post-inflammatory pseudopolyps. So CT is the practical imaging tool that is used in patients with severe colitis, as we have already seen. So in the acute stage, the early mucosal changes that I have described on barium enema are not seen on CT. So what we see on CT are inflammatory pseudopolyps and neural thickening or thinning. In the subacute phase, there is neural thickening and halo sign or neural stratification, and there can be luminal narrowing. And in the chronic phase, there is presence of narrowing and presacral space widening. So seeing an example of patient with acute severe colitis, where we can see that there is presence of inflammatory pseudopolyps because of denudation of adjacent mucosa, presence of ulcers, and presence of pericolonic inflammation is seen. The disease extent in this particular case is still the transverse colon. An example of subacute disease where we can see that there is loss of ostrations and there is presence of mucosal enhancement. The changes on MRI are similar to those seen on CT. And in addition, one can see the thickening and hyperintensity of mucosa and submucosa on T1 and T2 weighted images. And studies have shown that on MRI, the degree of neural enhancement correlates with the severity of disease activity. Ultrasound is being increasingly utilized because of its point of care approach. And the changes on ultrasonography in acute severe colitis include target appearance and neural thickening. And in case of extensive polyposis, thickening can be severe. This is a very recent study that has shown the role of ultrasound in patients with ulcerative colitis on follow-up. This was a multi-center study from Germany that showed that more than 80% of patients have colonic thickening on ultrasound at the time of relapse. And in this study that evaluated ultrasound findings at baseline, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, and 12 weeks, it was found that the 12 weeks ultrasonography correlated with clinical activity index, endoscopy, and fecal calprotectin, thereby meaning that ultrasound can probably be incorporated into clinical practice of follow-up of patients with ulcerative colitis. This publication shows that there is not much role of imaging as far as monitoring of patients with ulcerative colitis is concerned, and the monitoring has to be based on clinical and biochemical and endoscopic parameters. Coming to Crohn's disease, so the role of imaging is much more important in Crohn's disease, as I have already highlighted. One should be aware of the clinical classification, that is the revised Montreal classification, that takes into consideration the age, location, and disease behavior. The disease behavior clinically is classified into non-stricturing, non-penetrating, or stricturing, penetrating, and there is a perianal disease modifier. The radiological classification is somewhat different from clinical classification and classifies the disease as active inflammatory, mixed active inflammatory, and fibrostenotic, visualizing, penetrating, fibrostenotic, or inactive disease. In small bowel Crohn's disease, imaging can demonstrate early changes of Crohn's disease. It is useful to depict the entire extent of involvement and skip regions, as the evaluation of entire bowel is not feasible endoscopically. It helps determine the cause of deterioration in a patient who was previously stable. There may be presence of mesenteric changes like abscesses, perforation, which are detected on cross-sectional imaging. It helps distinguish between inflammatory and fibrotic stricture, although I'll be discussing the challenges involved in this particular area in detail later on. Investigate post-operative complications. Rule out the presence of Crohn's disease in patients with indeterminate colitis, and finally differentiate Crohn's disease from small bowel tuberculosis. Another case scenario of a 30-year-old male who presented with vague right lower abdominal pain underwent CT enterography, and one can see that there is presence of skip segments of subtle mucosal thickening and enhancement, which is asymmetric, involving the mesenteric aspect of the small bowel. The mesenteric changes are very subtle, and in fact may be evaluated as absent. So this was a very early change of Crohn's disease that was confirmed on ileocolonoscopy, showing hepatocellular biopsy confirmed the diagnosis of Crohn's disease in this case. So this is a very important publication that talks about the nomenclature of CT and MRI, MR enterography in patients with Crohn's disease, and all residents should actually go through this publication. I'll try to highlight the salient features that are relevant in day-to-day practice. So the first important change in Crohn's disease is the changes in the intestinal wall, and the intestinal wall changes can be classified as mural hyperenhancement, mural thickening, and intramural edema. So in this example, one can see that there is thickening of an ileal loop, and it is bilaminar pattern. Sometimes it can be trilaminar, that is seen more commonly on MRI, and there is presence of moderate degree of wall thickening, which is classified based on this criteria. And in the example here, we can see that this part of the ileal loop is thickened, and there is presence of high signal intensity on T2 images. Strictures in Crohn's disease are defined as areas of luminal larvae with unequivocal upstream dilatation. And it is important to understand that strictures in Crohn's disease are an admixture of active inflammation, proliferation of smooth muscle, and fibrosis. In some cases, peristalsis may mimic a stricture. However, in these cases, MR fluoroscopic techniques are quite useful, where one can see that the stenotic segment is transiently like opening up, which means that it was peristalsis and nothing else. And in this example, one can see that there is a long segment of undistended bowel with mild mural thickening and upstream dilatation, suggestive of a stricture. And the classification of upstream dilatation is mild and moderate to severe based on this criteria. Ulceration and sinus tracts. Ulcer is defined as a wall defect that doesn't extend outside the bowel wall, while a sinus tract extends outside the bowel wall, but not to an adjacent organ. The sinuses and fistula are almost always associated with stricture, and these lead to presence of bowel wall angulation and tethering to adjacent structures. This is an example of a patient with sinus and fistulae that shows presence of stricture with upstream dilatation and adjacent mesenteric changes and kinking of the bowel. Fistulae can be classified as simple or complex based on whether there is a single or multiple tracts, and it has a classic gastric appearance, as is seen in this case. There is a antrovesical fistula. The fistulae may be associated with inflammatory masses or intrabowel abscesses. Mesenteric changes are another important finding in patients with Crohn's disease, and these can be in the form of prominent vasa recti, as is seen in this example, or there can be fibrofatty proliferation. There can be inflammatory masses and abscesses and adenopathy more than 1.5 centimeters. This is one of these cases that underwent resection of the small bowel that shows extensive proliferation of mesenteric fat. Extraintestinal findings, I will not be going into the details of these. However, it's important to understand that one can see these findings on abdominal cross-sectional imaging, including primary sclerosing cholangitis. That is much more confidently diagnosed on an MR than on a CT. Venous thrombosis, as is seen in this example, there is thrombosis of the superior mesenteric vein with associated thickening of the small bowel. In addition, there can be thrombosis of the parietal vein, iliac or femoral veins, polylithiasis, nephrolithiasis, sacroiliitis, and AVN again diagnosed on MRI of the pelvis. So based on a combination of these findings, one would radiologically classify disease as active inflammatory if there is presence of wall enhancement, in thickened, non-contracted bowel segment, along with mesenteric changes, luminal narrowing without dilatation, and enhancing lymph nodes. As already discussed, the mural hyperenhancement can be stratified bilaminar or trilaminar pattern. So clinically, there is no difference between the course of patients having bilaminar or trilaminar pattern, and the later one is seen more commonly on MR enterography. Studies have shown that there is a correlation between degree of enhancement and severity of inflammation. And again, to highlight that presence of active inflammation doesn't exclude fibers. I'll be discussing about this concept later on again. So, a few examples: a patient with mural thickening and mucosal submucosal enhancement of ileal loop, along with mesenteric changes, suggestive of active inflammatory Crohn's disease. Another example of a patient that shows two skip segments of involvement. There is asymmetric involvement of the mesenteric wall of the distal small bowel with thickening and mesenteric changes in the form of womb sign. And in this part of the bowel, the mesenteric changes again are more pronounced, and the thickening is more than what we see in this particular segment. Case of Crohn's uveitis, where we can see that there is homogeneous thickening and enhancement of the jejunal loop with the congestion of vas acti. So disease is defined as quiescent or inactive if there is absent or minimal mural enhancement with normal or thickened wall. There can be fibrofatty proliferation, but there are no other mesenteric changes, and luminal narrowing can be seen. So this is an example of inactive or quiescent disease where we can see that there is extensive fibrofatty proliferation. These loops of the pelvic ileum are contracted, although there are no active changes in the mesentery. Mixed fibrostenotic and active inflammatory disease has both the components. Active component will be highlighted by the wall thickening and hyperenhancement, whereas the stenotic component will be highlighted by stricture, and penetrating disease may be present in these cases. So this is an example that I've already discussed. There is a long segment narrowing of the ileal loop with mild thickening, and there is presence of proximal dilatation. And in this particular case, there was an abdominal wall abscess. Another example of combined active inflammatory and fibrostenotic disease, we can see that there are multiple segments of stenosis. One can also see the prostrations and mesenteric changes in the form of prominent vas acti, and few subcentrimetic lymph nodes are also seen. Penetrating disease presents as sinus tracts, fistulae, inflammatory masses, abscesses, and free perforation. And penetrating disease may be seen in both active or mixed active inflammatory and fibrostenotic disease. So this is a 38-year-old female who was a known case of Crohn's disease on follow-up for last 6 years. Now presented with pneumochuria and hematuria. These are the MR images of this patient. Coronal T1 weighted MR shows that this part of the bowel is narrowed, and there is mural thickening. Associated mesenteric changes are seen, and there is upstream small bowel dilatation. On this T2 weighted MR, one can see that there is marked thickening of the dome of the urinary bladder and adjacent mesenteric changes. In this contrast enhanced image, one can see that there is homogeneous enhancement of the bowel wall, as well as adjacent mesentery. And in another anterior section, one can see that there is presence of fistula with the urinary bladder and adjacent small bowel loop, better seen on this subtracted image. And this axial T2 weighted image again confirms the presence of changes in the dome of the bladder and presence of bowel dilatation. So this was a case of active inflammatory and fibrostenotic disease with associated penetrating complications. Another example of active inflammatory Crohn's disease with antrovesical fistula, one can see that there is marked thickening of the pelvic ileal loop, which shows stratified neural enhancement, and there is a strict sign to suggest that there is presence of antrovesical fistula. Patients with penetrating complications can have the mesenteric changes more pronounced than the simple mesenteric vessel congestion and adenopathy, as in this case there is presence of phlegmonous change in the right iliac fossa, also seen on these coronal images. Fibrostenotic disease lacks the presence of active inflammation, that is, there are no neural edematous or enhancement changes, and there is no mesenteric change. These patients have a wall thickening with luminal narrowing with unequivocal upstream dilatation. So this was a follow-up case of Crohn's disease. The coronal MR image shows that there is a segment of narrowing of mid-iliac loop, which is seen on multiple sequences. And on early phase of contrast enhancement, there is minimal enhancement in this segment. However, on the delayed phase, there is enhancement of this segment, and there is diffuser restriction within this part of the bowel that suggests that possibly this is a fibrotic stricture, and this patient underwent the segmental resection of the bowel that confirms the presence of stricture, and histopathology confirmed presence of significant fibrosis in this particular bowel segment. So imaging has a role in assessment of disease activity, and MR is much more important as far as assessment of disease activity is concerned. And the differentiation of inflammation and fibrosis is quite challenging, as I'll be discussing in the coming slides, as both inflammation and fibrosis coexist, although we are concerned about the predominant component of fibrosis, because that would mandate surgery and the need for endoscopic pulmonary dilatation, and these patients typically do not respond to medical management. The widely accepted or used MRI disease activity scores are magnetic resonance index of activity that takes into consideration the wall thickness, relative enhancement of the bowel, and presence of edema and ulcerations, and activity index score that doesn't consider the enhancement characteristics and takes into consideration only the neural thickening and neural T2 scores. Fibrostenotic and stricturing Crohn's disease, I again will spend a few slides on this, because this is a very important part as far as the natural history of Crohn's disease is concerned, and there are some challenges involved with imaging this particular phenotype. Almost 10% of patients exhibit a stricturing phenotype at presentation, and progression to stricturing is seen in 15% of patients at 10 years and 21% of patients at 20 years. The various factors associated with stricturing include duration of disease, severity, ileal location, and new corticosteroid use. Endoscopy can diagnose stricturing disease in an accessible segment, and in other areas, the constrict criteria can be utilized, which suggests that the diagnosis of stricture should be based on the reduction in luminal diameter by more than 50% with upstream dilatation more than 3 centimeters and increased thickness of the bowel. The studies have shown that there is excellent sensitivity and specificity of both CT angiography and MR angiography in diagnosis of stricture. However, the challenge is to identify the predominant fibrotic or inflammatory component, that is to quantify fibrosis, and CT and conventional MR both are poor at doing this. And there are several newer methods that are being investigated, and the magnetization transfer ratio, which identifies water molecules linked to macromolecule, is one of the potential biomarkers, and 2 recent studies have shown the potential utility of this tool. The other studies have also highlighted the role of diffusion-weighted imaging and diffusion kurtosis imaging. One of the studies evaluated the percentage gain of enhancement between 70 seconds and 7 minutes at MR. Could diagnose the predominant fibrosis with a high sensitivity and specificity. There is evolving role of ultrasound shear wave elastography. The published studies have shown that CUS is not very accurate in detecting fibrosis. Perianal disease and Crohn's disease is common, and MR is the imaging modality of choice. In this case, one can see a simple intrasphincteric fistula. As was discussed by Dr. Shalini, the MRI is preferred in young patients and on follow-up of patients who already have previous CT angiography, in patients with suspected or known perianal disease, and in patients in whom the aim is to assess the response to therapy. There are a few additional imaging modalities that are being investigated in Crohn's disease. In a recent paper, a strategy of pan-capsule endoscopy versus ileocolonoscopy and MR enterography was investigated. It was found that overall sensitivity was comparable. However, capsular endoscopy has a higher specificity. PET-CT and PET-MRI are again the tools which are being evaluated, and the preliminary results have shown that PET scores are more informative than endoscopic scores. And in this interesting study, both PET-CT and PET-MRI were compared, and it was shown that PET-MR enterography was more accurate in assessing extraluminal complications. It was also more accurate in detecting a fibrotic component. Finally, the dilemma for a radiologist is to differentiate between Crohn's disease and tuberculosis. This is an excellent publication from Professor Raju Sharma that highlights in details the various differentiating points, highlighting the radiological features. The site of involvement is important, as cecum is more commonly involved in tuberculosis than Crohn's disease. Tuberculous strictures are typically shorter than Crohn's disease. Skip segments and multiple strictures are more common with Crohn's disease. If the neural involvement is stratified, it's more likely to support Crohn's disease. Periannual fistulae and mesenteric changes again are more common in Crohn's disease than tuberculosis. Strictures are concentric in TB compared to eccentric stricture with circulation, and as we have already seen in an example, are seen more commonly in Crohn's disease. Enteroliths are more common in TB, and necrotic lymph nodes are more common and almost specific for tuberculosis. This is a study from Ames Group that is basically a systematic review and meta-analysis that evaluated 6 studies and showed that necrotic lymph nodes have the highest diagnostic accuracy for diagnosis of ileocecal tuberculosis. Womb sign and skip lesions had the highest diagnostic accuracy for diagnosis of Crohn's disease. And it was highlighted that necrotic lymph nodes and womb signs on abdominal CT had the best diagnostic accuracy for differentiating Crohn's disease and ileocecal TB. This is an example of ileocecal tuberculosis. There is a large enterolith with contracted cecum. Another example of necrotic lymph nodes in the abdomen and in the chest, giving a diagnosis of tuberculosis. This is a publication from our group that suggests that the differentiation of TB and Crohn's disease is much more complex and should involve the clinical, biochemical, imaging, endoscopic, and histopathological evaluation. Only after a composite evaluation of all these tools, it may be possible to differentiate between tuberculosis and Crohn's disease. In conclusion, imaging plays an important role in diagnosis, staging, and prognostication of patients with Crohn's disease. A standard terminology and reporting format should be adopted. The resident should remember the acronym IBD. I represents inflammatory mesentery, B represents bowel wall changes, and D represents disease complications. So one should be careful to evaluate and report all these 3 components in a patient with Crohn's disease. It must be admitted that the role of imaging is still evolving, and there are a few issues, including characterization of stricture and differentiation of tuberculosis from Crohn's disease, which requires further research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.